Hey, everybody, welcome back to the One Step Better Business Podcast with Mike and Matt. Hopefully, you guys are having a great day. I know that we're super excited to talk to you today about client mix. What makes a good client? What makes a bad client? How we think about that here at Patrick Accounting. Hopefully, have some good discussions that are really all things client mix and ICP and all the things that we kind of deal with when we're looking at new clients. So, welcome, Matt. Hopefully, you're having a great day.
Yeah, it's a good day so far. It's
Eh,
early,
eh.
early.
Yeah, we are recording this in the morning time
We
versus
don't
afternoon.
normally record in the morning,
Yeah, we'll see
so
how this goes.
my coffee is kicked in, so I'm ready to go.
I'm half a cup. Somewhat recently here on the PASB board specifically, I've seen some threads pop up about construction clients or dental clients or lawyer clients. And it's interesting to see the responses because some people are like, man, I love this type of client. And other people are, I would not touch him with a 10-foot pole. And so let's start with I understand that everybody's going to think about this a little bit differently. And everybody has their own little niche or niche that they have uncovered. And that's awesome. So we're going to talk about that through the lens of what we think about when we think about a good client, a bad client, who we target from an ICP standpoint, and let's see if we can find out some different industries that we work well in.
Well, also, I think it'd be fun to talk through the things we thought would be a good client and aren't a good client, and then just because they're in an industry we like doesn't make them a good client. You know, we have that conversation a lot. Like just because they're a restaurant doesn't make sure they're a good client, or just because they're a home care, or just because they're in construction that doesn't make them a bad client. Like all the things that way might be interesting to have that conversation, because we've struggled with this, not struggled, but yeah, maybe struggled. Just like what I think is a good client doesn't mean what my staff thinks is a good client, because they're like, well, they're never around to answer my questions. I'm like, yeah, because they're on the job site, or they're working in behind the kitchen or whatever it is. And so it's like, yeah, it's always a different struggle.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting because this is not a simple topic. There's a lot of complexity that comes into this because we have situations where we have multiple service offerings. And in some of those service offerings, we have a good client for accounting, maybe a bad client for payroll.
For sure.
Or a good client for our payroll services, maybe a bad client for our accounting services. And then we start to throw, bill pay layer on top of that, and insurance layer on top of that, and HR stuff. And it gets a little bit fuzzy because we deal with the dilemma of, would I be willing to let go of an accounting client that might be paying us $30,000 over some minor or even on the payroll side, sometimes major conflict or issues for that one thing that they're paying us maybe $1,000 a year on.
Correct.
And it turns into a little bit of a butting of heads of like, all right, we have to look at this holistically to see
the compromises we have to make, to best service them. And then like, we actually, had this recently come up. It's like, we've always said, if you're an accounting client, you pretty much need to be a payroll client. Well, we run into situations all the time where like logistically on the client side, it's just not feasible, or they're a terrible payroll client. Yeah. And so even though we brought them in there, okay, client, they're a terrible payroll client. They either don't have enough employees to actually, matter, or they have, using a bunch of subcontractors. They have a, foreign employee, or they have, they're in 37 states and they constantly turning their people over. You're in ad states, those states. Those aren't great payroll clients. Now, can we service them? Yeah. Can we service them? Awesome. Maybe not as well as I'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun conversation.
It's hopefully we'll be able to kind of get to the heart of some of these issues, because the question, what makes a good client, is probably a little bit fuzzy in our office. If you were to ask every person in every different layer of leadership here, what is a good client or what is a bad client, I would expect that you're probably going to get some different answers. So we might be able to clarify some of that stuff. But here's where I want to start. We use terminology here. ICP is a big thing that we use internally. So let's define some terms a little bit. What is an ICP?
That is the ideal client profile that we are trying to market to find new customers.
I think about our ICP as these are types of customers that we are willing to pay money to go pursue. This is where all of our sales and marketing efforts are really targeted. They're focused in that area. Now, that is different than an acceptable client.
For sure.
So talk a little bit about that tension that exists between ICP and ACP.
Yeah, we're going to, in our case, we're going to spend marketing dollars to go try to pursue a client. An acceptable client may be, we got a client referral to, I'll use a graphic designer, or an industry that we don't typically work in. Okay, it's a service provider, it's a retailer, whatever, whatever it is that is not what we're specifically trying to target. That doesn't mean that that's not work we can do, and it doesn't mean it's not work we want to do and we can do it really well. Just means that we're not focused on going to hunt that down and find it.
Yeah. And that could sometimes be because
And the rub there is always okay, well, why aren't we, chasing, we're going to go after contractors, or we're going to go after, electrical subs, or we're going to go after graphic designers. I'm like, yeah, we could, but we're already chasing 17 different
yeah,
things. So let's narrow our market. It's hard to spend money everywhere.
it's a resource
It's a
constraint
resource.
is really what it
It's
is.
budget, realistically.
Yeah. And so when we talk about our ICP, I don't want people to get the impression that that is the only type of client that we work with, because we work with a variety of clients around Cali. Very, very
We have a mutual fund, is why I
a little bit. Yeah. And so we're going to start talking through our ICP. That's what we're going to start with. These are the types of clients that we target. We are willing to spend money, put our resources behind to go find them. So when we think about our ICP for our restaurants, we have those relatively clearly defined.
Yep.
So let's talk through that to begin with.
Yep. So, and what, well, I'm gonna answer your question, but I will say when we start talking to acceptable clients, there's a different set of criteria that becomes acceptable. So ICP for us, restaurants today, we are targeting restaurants in the Memphis, primarily in the Memphis area, and within or plus or minus 300 miles from Memphis. So that gets us in our world to Nashville, Little Rock, Birmingham, Jonesboro, Oxford, Jackson, Mississippi. That's kind of the secondary. That's probably secondary. And it's not just restaurants. It's, we're looking for 1 to 5 unit restaurants. That's what we are looking for in ICP. So these are restaurants that have multi-units, or, no more than maybe 5 multi-unit restaurants. We have plenty of clients that are larger than that, and those are acceptable clients. Hey, we have a 12 restaurant group or a 15 restaurant group. Those are great. We're not going to try to hunt those down. Those are a little harder onboarding process for us. It's a little harder for the client transition. It's harder to find those groups. So we can go specifically market to what is our ideal client profile. We also have a tech stack that we want them to have associated. It's going to be, they're on a point of sale. They're okay with either QuickBooks Online or Restaurant 365. They're going to work with us our way. And we want them to be, so other things like it'd be a profitable. We want them to be finding a profitable restaurant. We want to be finding a healthy fear of the IRS. Those are some of the acceptable things we start talking through. But like, it starts with the industry that we're wanting to be in. Is that any different than you were thinking?
No,
and that's also what I say is, this is what I think it is. You may think it's something different, and my staff thinks it's totally different, and then Shelby thinks it's something different. So make sure it's really crystal clear as a problem.
Yeah, and for their ICP, that is, I would say that that's probably more important to have that clarity than just any acceptable client.
Today's sponsor is Cloud Accountant Staffing. Every firm owner I talk to is asking the same question right now. Should we hire offshore? I'll tell you what we're doing about it. We've hired offshore before, and we're actively working with Cloud Accountant Staffing right now on a couple of roles at Patrick Accounting. The reason we pick them, they take the fear out of it. Disclosure, security, onboarding someone across the world. They've walked tons of firms through it. Their portal is really easy to use. It lets you browse real candidates that are available to hire right now, book interviews yourself. You can have them vet them for you. They help you with the whole process. So head to cloudaccountantsstaffing.com right now. Links in the show notes.
Because our ICP is where we're literally spending money to go target. And if it turns out that maybe my sales and marketing team is spending money to go target somebody that the firm is like, what are we doing? This is not, I would never want this client anyway. And obviously you can see the problem that could come with that.
I mean, I would say today we're probably looking for restaurants over $1 million per location. That's kind of our starting point. We think they have a chance to be profitable at that point.
Yeah. We also work in the home health or home care industry. That's one that, especially with an acquisition that we made earlier this year, became even more prominent. It was an industry that we were kind of had our toe dipped into, specifically on the work side, pretty deep. But this is really expanding those services for all things accounting. And that's going to be it has been a really interesting.
We're learning a lot there. That is specifically, it's about 4 niches. I'll say niches inside of home care. So it's home care, I say skilled home care facilities, not like, I'll say like comfort keepers or visiting angels, not basically elder care, but this is, skilled home care services, hospice, skilled nursing facilities,
palliative care.
And so those 4 are, hey, we're looking for those in states that have certain rules around licensing that they actually will issue licenses to. So in our case, that's Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. Those are the states, that we're really specifically targeting, because they have some specific requirements. They're going to have they have a cost reporting need. They have either, Medicare or Medicaid filings they are responsible for filing. They have a specific KPI. We understand how they make money, what the timeline is of getting Medicare funding, all those things. And we probably want them, if we're ICP is post Medicare has already been approved in their funding stage, but we do have the possibility to help them get through that process. So that's kind of where our ICP is probably on the other side of getting, they've already had Medicare approved or government funding is approved, but at the same time, the acceptable is on their side.
Yeah. The billing is in place. They're not pre-revenue. The ICPs that we have today, though, are not necessarily industries that we started and said, hey, you know what, this is going to be a really great target. Let's go for it. Instead, these are things that have kind of somewhat naturally evolved over time. I mean, we never started to say, hey, we want to be the premier restaurant accounting firm in the Memphis area.
Yeah.
We had a restaurant client that turned into another restaurant client that turned into 5 restaurant clients. And it just kind of organically grew.
Back to how, my business started, it was, we were looking for people that did not want to do bookkeeping themselves and met what we call our criteria for being a client: healthy fear of the IRS, profitable, passionate about their business, want to do things the right way. I'll say tech friendly, so they're not tech adverse, and they had to be working on QuickBooks. So we had basically an acceptable use type client, and so that was service based, because service based means they can, we don't have to worry about managing inventory, job costing. That was kind of some of our basic criteria. Well, that turned into, hey, that restaurant qualifies in all those areas. And so we got one, and then we got one turned to two turned to four turned. Now we have about 110 or so. And what we found is I like the owners. The owners of those businesses care about their restaurants. They are passionate about running a good business. Our clients that we have today don't want to do booking themselves. They don't have infrastructure to do it. So it fit a lot of our criteria, but that doesn't make every restaurant a good client. So that's where the rub always comes into, hey, just because you have a restaurant, if you don't do things the right way and you're kind of tech adverse and you don't really like change too much and you're not profitable and you don't really have a healthy fear of the IRS, that doesn't make you a good client.
Yeah.
And so we have to scope that out when we're more bringing on a new client.
Yeah. I mean, really what you say, as you get into our criteria of what is an acceptable client, what that is if you violate those items, then we're going to have some pretty hard conversations about, can you continue with our services? Our goal is to try to identify it on that sell side. And if in the sell side, we see something like, hey, you don't have any money to actually pay our fees, then it would be malpractice for us to say, we can't sign up now.
We can't help you.
We can't help you.
Yeah. Now, can we, for a client that is trying, if they're, hey, so this is where acceptable client comes in. Hey, I've been losing money. I've been doing this for a year. I've finally got this back to, I think, to net zero. This is some of the challenges we faced. Here's my plan for getting that better. Is there a possibility of us taking them on a client? It is possible sometimes. Is that ideal? No. And are we going to try to hunt that down? No. But that's where what's an acceptable client acceptance process is a big part of that.
Yeah. All right. So I want to hit on that, because what you just said is in tension to what I just said. I just said, hey, if you don't hit these criteria, you can't be a client. And you just said, but wait. And that is, I think, exactly where the tension exists within our team, because that's absolutely true. We say that these are our criteria, but we also know that while those are black and white criteria, a lot of times there are some gray cases that it doesn't always fit. And so
startups are a good example of that.
We're never, ever going to say hey, your black and white criteria can never be violated. That has to be in place all the time. And there's no exceptions to that. That's not the intention of acceptable client. It is putting guardrails up to have a default to say, no, that's not an acceptable client. But wait, let's see if we can find a way, or maybe that there's some unique situations that are out there that we're going to.
And that's a rub.
Think about that.
It is absolutely.
It is.
We run into that problem not all the time. I mean, and there's some black and whites in there.
Yeah.
Healthy fear of the IRS is a black and white for us.
But
not wanting to be on QuickBooks Online.
Let's talk about that though. Let's talk about that. Healthy fear of the IRS isn't a black and white definition. So what does it mean to have a healthy fear of the IRS? I think that some people in our office would say if a client even has a negative opinion towards the IRS, that means they don't have a healthy fear of the IRS. They can't be a good client. And some people in our office may say, man, I love the client that's willing to play every game possible to find every loophole to try to beat the system in an above the board way.
That's the aggressive and conservative line,
Absolutely.
right?
But we're talking about spectrums here,
yeah.
And so that's where some of the complexity comes in
For
all
sure.
of this stuff.
In my mind, it's, what is your risk tolerance for, hey, we probably should be filing in that other state, but here's why I would say yes or no, and I'll let the client decide. Or, hey, you have, automobile expenses, or you have travel expenses that are business purposes, but not 100% business purposes. And so there's some learning how to understand the client's aggressiveness, the staff account on our team's aggressiveness. We want to hug that line. We want to be on that line of right and wrong. And if we take a position, we want to be able to have a backup for it but it is like, we get paid in cash, and I have a bunch of undocumented workers working for me. And I have, this other, I don't pay overtime to, we start having some problems.
Yeah. I think the way that I think about the IRS, when the healthy fear of the IRS, and it goes beyond that. They have a strong desire to do right.
Yeah.
There is oftentimes, and this is where emotional intelligence comes in, right? Because you got to be able to read the room a little bit, but there's oftentimes for that person, for that business owner, the rub between ignorance. I didn't know that I was doing it wrong. And maybe my industry says this is the way you're supposed to do it.
Yeah. Or I have to do this.
Or
I can't fight anybody.
Versus I am going to go and try to find a way to screw everybody around me. And that's a clear, when there's a decision between wrong and bad,
yeah. And we try to sniff all those things out of the front side. I've had a number of prospect meetings where we go, yeah, they just told me the first 2 minutes that I'm in this room with them. This is early on when Rick was here. It was like, oh yeah, I just make up my sales tax number every month. And I'm like, yeah, you're not a client.
Yeah. We've had clients that we've sent sales tax returns to, and they say, no, can you make that less?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, so that those are the things that, because we don't bat 1,000 here. And
okay, we got a problem.
Oh, I think that might be something worth looking into.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, that's, hey, can you sharpen your pencil? That's a common one during time. Like, I think we've sharpened it.
It's pretty sharp.
Yeah, it's pretty sharp. And make sure that nothing was missed. And I don't like giving the bad tax answer, but it's the answer.
Yeah. All right. Healthy fear of the IRS is one that we beat up a little bit.
Yeah.
Money, not money. They have the ability to pay our fees, and it makes sense for them to pay our fees, right?
Yeah. We have clients that are too small. I mean, this is one like, hey, why don't you bring in clients that are $300,000 revenue? Go, well, we're going to charge them, in order for us to make any money, we're going to charge them $600 or $700 a month. They're making $15,000 profit a year. We're taking half their profit. It doesn't, and it's not take, but it's like,
we're not providing that much value.
What value are we taking to this point? When you grow a little bit and you actually need, like, hey, it's probably still, unfortunately, you still need, this is still a self-service. You need to take care of your own books and get your tax return done. That's probably a better answer for you right now. I understand why they feel like they need our help, because they don't want to do it. And should I care about that? I just do. I think they need to be more profitable with that in order to justify our fee. It's hard to say, hey, because if not, they're going to go, man, this is really expensive. It is expensive because it takes time. And
relative to where you're at, it is.
If it's half your profit, that's a big number.
Yeah. But there are other accounting firms out there that would say that is a great client for them. And so talk a little bit about why you chose to say that client that is maybe a startup, or they're not as mature yet, is not the ideal client, or even in some ways an acceptable client for Patrick Accounting.
Yeah. I mean, first, for what we're being asked to do, there's always going to be a lot of tension with us and the client on our fee. That fee sensitivity is an issue. I don't know how much I can help them if I can't fix sales. And that's probably what the biggest trouble is. And so they start looking at us as a cost, not an investment. Like our job is to help them grow and to run a really good back office. I have a hard time. And I also think it's kind of where it's time to pull their pants up a little, pull their big boy panties on and figure it out. Like, this is still you're in survival gorilla mode still. It's not time to outsource this. This is not something that you're going to get enough bang for your buck. Spend a couple hours. Also, this is good for you to know your numbers. So I think it's something they should do.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a better answer. I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's how I think about it.
So these kind of criteria here are really what we would call the psychographic piece. It's we're trying to get in the mind of that business owner. Like, do you understand that you have rules to follow? Do you understand that you have money that pays our fees? Do you understand that that you're outsourcing this and that we're not just an extension of your team that you get to dictate terms to?
Yeah, it's going to be our way, not your way.
Yeah. Do you understand that we're going to use a lot of different tech to do the job, all that kind of stuff? That's what, like, that's the psychographic piece. If you have to get comfortable with those things. The other part on that we talked a little bit about on the ICP side is more the demographic stuff. That's the industry. We do have revenue. I'm not going to say requirements, but guidelines that do show whether or not a particular business can be ideal or acceptable in our world. Then there's also just the gut feel piece. And we run into this a little bit where on the sales side, everything is going well. Client seems to be in good shape. They get onboarded and then they get handed over to our service team. And it's just like, you know what? Something feels off about this client. How do you deal with those tensions?
Yeah, I mean, we have that happen a lot. I mean, sales has a great relationship. They hit it off with the prospect. The prospect was super responsive. All the stuff we needed to get, through the sales process was very efficient. Then our staff gets involved and they're like, this guy never responds. No matter how many times I text him or call him or email him, he never responds. Or you get I don't know what this business really is even doing. So we've had this happen with some nonprofits that we like our team, I would say, has a little difficulty sometimes with nonprofits that they don't believe in the mission for, or they don't understand what the business model is about. And so you start going, those are some really hard rubs because you're like, but they're a really good client. They're really good guys. But I don't, we had a client that helps support other nonprofits. And it's like, I don't even understand what their business model is about. And that's just hard. That's just, I don't have a good answer there other than, is it salvageable or do I just need to move it to a different person on our team? Most of the time, the communication breakdowns are the biggest rubs we have. It's I'm not able to get the stuff in a responsive way. The client is not as urgent to the client until it is urgent. And sometimes we have people that are really good at managing that urgency and some people are not as good as managing that urgency. We talk about, we need the clients to kind of act like adults and, we sent you a message or we called you, we would like you to return the phone call. But likewise, I'm sure our clients have that same frustration with us sometimes, which is, hey, you said you're going to have that for me on Tuesday. It's Wednesday. I haven't heard from you. And, we try not to never let that happen, but it's reality. It happens. And, it's just a constant little butting at the heads.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's kind of like, hopefully the trend that everybody hears.
As humans are, the trend for me is it's not perfect.
Yeah. And it requires somewhat constant, I would say regular oversight into. There's got to be, we have some checks and balances internally that says, hey, you know what, I think this client needs to go, or I have an issue here. And there's going to be some conversations around that. I don't think any one person in our office has I'm not going to say final say so to fire a client. In some ways they do, but in a lot of ways that's not how it happens.
No, it's usually a multi-level conversation to talk through all the things. I would say, one of the things we've done well, which drives some of our own internal efficiencies is keeping a pretty tight client list where clients are going to fit closer to the box than outside the box. I think back to early on, I got a lot of pressure from, my, Tyler and Joe and Rich and all the guys at PASBA about the type of clients I was accepting. We were trying to grow fast, which means our acceptable list got a little broader than it probably should. And you find like, well, only that one person can work on that account, or that client is kind of a jackwagon, but you start going through that. And I think we were, trying to go after some not ICP restaurants. Hey, this is a 20 restaurant group. We want to get that. And then when you get them in, you're like,
surely we can figure it out.
We'll figure it out because it's a lot of money. And you go, yeah, that's a little, we don't really have the team to be able to handle that the best. And so that's where they're like, man, I want, they'll call, PASMA calls them flapjacks. It's like, I want a client that is easy, my lowest level, my most inexperienced bookkeeper can do, my most experienced accounting manager can handle it without a problem. And I'm like, yes, that's ideal.
Yeah.
But
that's not everybody.
That's not every. I want more of that. I can't find all of those. So we start finding clients that fit our team's mix a little bit.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because when we have those conversations around, what's an acceptable client, and we start to get out of bounds a little bit.
And we're like, we all kind of talk ourselves into it.
Yeah. And also I think those are the war stories that a firm needs to go through.
Oh, yeah.
They need to have that client that might be outside of their norm and maybe is willing to pay them a boatload of money, and it needs to crash and burn so they can feel what that's like.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, to put some money in the bank to maybe not do that again. Like,
well,
you got to go
the
through
scary
those
part
things.
is for me now, I think back to when we first started with those first 2 restaurants. We got a 2 new restaurant groups the same week. It was both 5 units. Well, one was 3 units, one was 5 units. And I remember going, this is going to be great. And I also remember what our effective rate was for the first 6 months on those clients. And it was well below what I was paying my team to do the work.
Negative $3.
Yeah, right. Effective rate was not great. But what it did for us was we had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that turned into, well, so in the very beginning when we did bill pay, we had an admin doing bills and the bookkeeper doing the accounting. And we were kind of saying yes to whenever they wanted to pay the bills and how the bill pay process was. And
you learn that you need a system around it.
And how do we handle QuickBooks Desktop with multi-unit restaurants in weeks? They were both on 13 fours. And I'm like, we have none of this. Like, we're figuring out as we go. And we were just getting hammered, like just absolutely destroyed. Well, today that client comes on board and it's a normal and it's how we do it. And so that
is our flapjack.
And this is sad, but those clients were kind of R&D, right? That's that was us figuring out how to do the process. Those are our flapjacks now. If I had a 5-unit restaurant, that it would come on like any other client, would never have an issue. The client we would know exactly how to onboard it. We would tell them how they're going to do 13 periods of 4 weeks. We'd tell them what our accruals we're going to make. Like it just would be how we do it.
Yep.
But we didn't do that.
It
wasn't always that way, which just sucks because, even as we're getting, we with the Night acquisition, it's been, we haven't done accounting with home care that way. We brought her team in. So we're learning how they were handling things different than us.
Yeah.
And we're like, that actually is pretty smart. Also, if you did this here, so this is the melding of the 2 processes. And like, so month 1, it was a little rub, month 2 was a little rub. And next day we're going, hey, look at the improvements we've made in just 5 months. And so we have, we go after salons and spas, or we go after electrical contractor, whatever it is. Like, if I wanted to figure out how to do job costing and I needed to do it, could I say yes? And if I did do that, what would that mean? So that's where identifying your niches is like, what's the right one?
Well, I think that's also that's the value in staying in one lane to some extent.
Oh, yeah.
Because you get to develop some expertise that gets deep to where what other people might find is complex or difficult, that's natural.
I've got 10 people on our team that does nothing but that's the restaurant team. They do 120 restaurants and they do other things, but that's the primary business. They also know Restaurant 365. They know all the tech vendors. They know all the vendors in Memphis of who supplies the food and how they're going to bill them. And we know that what's the KPIs they care about? What's the other tech they're using? If they're not using Works, what are they doing? Like all that stuff we know. And when the client needs something, we can be a real advisor at that point because we didn't have the depth. But at the same time, we didn't start there. And I think about our niches today. If we wanted to start identifying the nest niches, we have, I don't know, 15 law firms we work with, or we have, I don't know, I think we have 25 gyms or close to 30 gyms. And she like going, we have these other niches that we're not probably actively pursuing at a volume yet, but there's another niche already built into our practice. And so that's where finding it's not trying to chase too many things at the same time. Like we just pick 1 or 2 and just go full speed at those instead of trying to do 15.
Yeah. That's a good thought. Just to kind of wrap things up. I think if anything, this has made it clear that 1, you need to have some written criteria on what makes a good client. And the written criteria isn't enough. You need to take that written criteria and over years of time, build stories around it. What's the nuance? What's the exception? Where this starts to break down, and share that with your team as much as possible.
I popped to my mind as think through, the hotel work that we did with M3, the Restaurant 365 work that wasn't an intentional that turned into an intentional because a client decided to do it. And we're like, we don't want to lose a client. So we say yes. Mm-hmm. And now we have 25 clients on Restaurant 365. Those exceptions to the rule, you have to be willing to say yes or no, this is worth investing in as you're deciding what your next ICP is going to be, or like, hey, this may be something I don't know yet. And so it's not a perfect system.
Yeah. If you say no to everything that's not in that very, very defined box, then you're never going to expand what that box looks like. Frankly. And sometimes that's okay. Yeah. Not saying that's a bad thing all the time.
I think
diversification of your client mix is also has some value.
Yeah, because I
So you
did
look
think
into
through
that.
like March 17th, 2020, when all the restaurants closed, I got a little nervous.
Yeah, we potentially lost 50% of our revenue in
A day.
a day, and that was a little bit scary.
Yep.
So, client mix, fun stuff. I think we talked about this stuff for a long time, especially you start to get into client stories, which can sometimes get us in trouble. So let's
we're gonna move on.
Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for listening. Really appreciate you tuning in, and make sure you click on that like button, subscribe button, never miss an episode, all the things. Really appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.